Who's your worst neighbor, and what makes them so ducking awful? My wife and I purchased our first house about 3 years ago. While moving and there were my new neighbors drinking on their front porch. No big deal. While bringing the last load of boxes into the house, my neighbor comes up, welcomes me to the neighborhood, mentions how nice my TV is. Fast forward 1 week. We are headed out to dinner. This neighbor stops me before getting in the car and asks how long we will be gone. Huge red flag. I lie. Tell him I'm just running to the gas station 1 block away and will be back immediately. 20 minutes later I get a phone call from the local police. This moron broke into my house in broad daylight with 3 other neighbors watching. Luckily these neighbors weren't pieces of shit too. He cut his hand on the window he was attempting to climb through and used his bleeding hand on every doorknob in my house. He is now a number in the US penal system. My neighbor has no ducking sense of time. One time we had to talk to him about not using power tools or splitting wood at 3 in the morning. What makes him worse? He gets his smaller trash can to pay less to the city, but then puts all his extra trash in our bin so ours overfills, and we have to pay extra. Neighbor called the police on my barking dog. Police came. It was her dog. My next door neighbor is lovely in nearly every way. He's friendly, has a cute dog, and he brought us fish and chips for lunch on the day we moved in. He watches our house when we are away and deals with repair people if we are at work. Since he's retired, practically perfect in every way. But his garden is full of wind chimes. Like, there could well be more than 100. The constant chiming 24/7 makes me want to garrote him. I hear them in my sleep. I hear them at work. I swear they're following me. The chimes never stop. Edit, my first gold. Thank you, kind stranger. I've written about my crazy neighbor before. I have since moved. Quick recap, nutjob who broke into my room in the middle of the night and stood next to my bed with a power drill as I woke up. She carried her dead dog in a see-through plastic bag, stuck a pencil up said dog's ass to get the attention of my handsome friend, and so much more. She is now in jail waiting for trial after attacking the new tenant with a power drill. I had this neighbor. She had a little tiny Pomeranian dog that barked at everything, which wasn't too bad actually. The dog wasn't outside much, and barking dogs aren't too hard for me to ignore. What was really hard to ignore was this woman yelling, "Nala, no bark," at the top of her lungs every time the dog barked. It drove me and my roommate up the wall. Edit, enough people have asked me if I live in or have ever lived in Jersey that it necessitates a response. Fortunately, I have not. I can only imagine how loud the barking/yelling can be that all of Jersey knows about it. He takes firewood from our wood pile at night or when he knows we're away for use in his own fireplace. Our neighbor across the street has seen him doing it and has kept us informed. Close bracket. In the summer, he's the tomato bandit, stealing produce from our garden. This summer, I'm going to install a surveillance camera to catch him in the act. We received a very stern letter from our town animal control officer. One of our neighbors, the one who happened to drunkenly hit our mailbox, contacted them to complain about the unlicensed dogs which we allow to roam through the neighborhood, barking and digging up lawns. We don't own any dogs. 13 years ago I found out my neighbor was having an affair with my ex-wife. So yeah, worst neighbor ever. The neighbor's ducking kids, man. It starts every spring. They only have one speech volume, which is scream. It sounds like children are being murdered on a daily basis. They jump all over my porch swing, even though I have repeatedly asked the parents to tell them not to. They run up and down the stairs of my porch constantly. I'm just waiting for one to get seriously hurt, and then it's my fault. I have a narrow driveway and last summer the one got his bike wedged between my house and my car's passenger door. Scratched the shit out of it. Basically they just run wild and the parents either don't care or are too drunk to notice at times. I don't know when I turned into a crotchety old man at 30, but damn those kids. Neighbor lady and her male fiance, neighbor Jude, kidnapped neighbor lady's ex-wife, confine ex-wife for 2 days, beat on her, force ex-wife to admit she inappropriately touched her own son, which she didn't, and recorded it. threatened to turn recording over to police if ex-wife didn't sign over custody of child to neighbor lady. Ex-wife eventually escapes, calls police, and neighbors are arrested for aggravated kidnapping. That's the worst story I have about those neighbors, but I've got plenty of others. I have these stupid college kids that just started renting a house next to me. Every single weekend for 3 months straight they've been throwing parties. That's not so bad, even though they are super loud and won't shut up until about 3 AM. What makes them the worst is that we live in a court, so whenever the party ends, all these drunk ductards get in their cars and drive home. Almost every single neighbor, including me, had windows shattered, cars dented, or side panels destroyed because of these assholes. Not a single note left or insurance info exchanged. At least 8 hit and runs in the last 3 months. Fuck these people. Edit. After all these comments, I've decided to call the cops next time they throw a party, as I know they are all driving drunk afterwards, and see if the cops will come out. I doubt they will, but it's worth a shot, right? I'm also going to invest in some outdoor CCTV cameras. It's going to be a bitch to set up, but like others have stated, it'll be worth it. You can stop flooding my inbox now. Fucking Pam. Pam was a single mom with her teenage daughter, and for the first few years we more or less got along. Helped her move some furniture in, listened to her bitch about her work, and ignored the smoke that billowed off of her adjacent back deck. I don't know what caused it, but Pam started to lose her shit. Everyone was out to get her, myself included, and she loved to call the cops. Once she called the cops because the garbage man put my trash can too close to her driveway after emptying it. Usually it was for watching TV at 9 PM at night, because she thought any noise was a pointed attempt to keep her from sleeping. The craziest was when I was having an argument during the summer and some windows were open. Pam called the police and told them that I had been recording an argument that she had with her daughter and was playing it back on loop to torment her. Pam was nuts. Which one do you want? The guy who would go on drug-fueled rampages, screaming for hours at a time? The one who would masturbate while staring at and recording women through his front window as they passed by? The one who stabbed a guy in his house? Or the one who had 2 different cars of his set on fire within a single week? The last one is especially fun, as their next door neighbor's handicapped accessible van caught fire too. Edit. I can't believe I forgot my favorite crazy neighbor story! Exclamation mark. When I was in high school, our across the street neighbor declared himself a member of the Montana militia. We don't live in Montana, or anywhere close, and decided that paying taxes and car registration fees was unnecessary, since he was now a sovereign nation into himself. He had quite a few Dale Gribble eccentricities. He knew that eventually the government would be coming to claim his properties, so he prepared. He removed the fence to his backyard, lined up his 3 cars side by side, and replaced the fence. He then welded all 3 cars together via a couple long bars across the bottom. Then left his yard hose on for days, weeks. Close bracket. When they finally came to take his cars away, they had to remove the fence. Then tried dragging the first car out. That one dragged the other 2 along with it, which pulled them all deep into the mud. They had to get several trucks and a welder out to take care of the matter. It was pretty fantastic. My current neighbors are loud, and they smoke like chimneys. They have a medium-sized dog that lives outside. He's called Rocket, and he's so bored that he barks a lot at small things. Open the back door on their side of the house, he's off. He won't stop barking for 15 minutes to an hour. That barking ruins me. They go out shopping on the weekend, and he starts barking. Not irregular, I'm excited barks. I can filter those out in my head. These are I have nothing better to do barks. One every second with a monotonous regularity that does my head in. They constantly leave the poor mutt outside in the cold, and he sits and whines all the way into the night until he falls asleep. Does my landlady's daughter count? I live in a room with private bathroom off of their home, and it's a pretty convenient setup. I'm almost never home other than to sleep, so generally the little annoyances don't bother me. But holy hell, I want to throw this girl into a bag and drown her into the river. She's 19 years old, living at home, while she takes some time off from college. Okay, pretty reasonable. I've been there before. except she acts like a 5-year-old. Her speaking voice is, at best, a yell. At worst it's a demon screech from hell. She likes to hang out in the room directly next to mine and scream full volume at her mother pretty much every day. They are not normal arguments either. Her mother is always very calm and reasonable, while this girl just throws tantrums like a child because she doesn't like what her mother is making for dinner, or her mother isn't paying enough attention to her. Just really the kind of stuff toddlers enjoy complaining about. Normally I just tune it out, but I work an overpass shift on the weekends and have to catch up on sleep during the day. Unfortunately for me, she has the weekends off, and it seems like they are her favorite time to scream for hours on end. This girl also fancies herself a singer and is trying to get herself into a performance art program at some college. She's applied to a bunch now I think, and she likes to practice for her auditions again in the room right next to mine. Her voice literally sounds like a dying cat, hence the river drowning. Of course if anyone tries to give her constructive criticism she just shrieks, so they let her be. Now recently I've heard a lot of sobbing from her because she's starting to get rejection letters from the colleges she's been applying to with these horrible auditions. I normally try to keep as much distance from her as possible, but her sister and I are friends, so when her sister is visiting from out of town this girl will invite herself along on our plans, and since we don't want to listen to her scream we just let it happen. On one of these outings I learned that she's also a dancer. I figured we had finally found some common ground, so I ask her what styles she's into, and she says ballet, modern, and tango. I don't know much about the first two, but I'm a competitive international ballroom dancer. So I tried asking her what style tango she dances, assuming she probably also dances the other dances in the style, and just mentioned the dance she's working on. She just met me with a blank stare and repeated as if I were the 5-year-old that she's dancing tango. Didn't I hear her? So I elaborate, asking if she means international or American, and she starts to get pissed off saying that she just dances regular tango. Apparently she just walked into an Arthur Murray dance studio and told them she wanted to dance tango, and because it's Arthur Murray they charged her an absurd amount of money for their studio gear and just started teaching her some unidentifiable form of tango. At that point I was just like, oh, okay cool, but I had already set off her age, so she starts shrieking asking what I even know about tango. I reminded her that I'm a ballroom dancer, and her response was, I don't dance ballroom. I dance tango. On you ducking listening? We just don't really speak anymore. And yet the headache just from listening to her in the next room never seems to go away. My next door neighbor has a dog that barks incessantly. Day, night. It doesn't matter. I'm not usually at home during the day, so that PRT doesn't bother me. But when it barks without fail every night at 12 AM and 2 AM for sometimes hours I cannot stand it. Multiple neighbors have called the police with noise complaints, and even when you go bang on their door then don't answer the door, then simply go outside and beat the dog and let it in for a few hours till 6 AM when it starts again. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. Rough neighborhoods are kinda funny, based on what I've heard from other people with similar experiences, in that you tend to have a really polarizing effect. You have your ghost neighbors, people that never talk to anyone and for all intents and purposes don't exist. You have your neighbors from hell, and you have your awesome neighbors that you keep as close to you as possible, because in that kind of setting, you need to. The neighbor on either side of the house I grew up in was pretty good. On the right was a ghost neighbor who eventually started talking to us and being pretty cool, and on the left were my godparents. Across the street was a family of meth addicts. 2 doors down from them on the corner was a guy who cooked and sold meth. He had a network of users and sellers all down the street, and damn near one corner house at every intersection was involved with him. This guy was a ducking icon. People in the area called him a number of things. Tweaker Dan was one nickname. The white guy was another. He had a makeshift auto shop in his garage, and he worked on cars from around 5 AM until about midnight every day, loudly, punctuated by people coming and going from his house to buy meth or shoot the shit or whatever. Sometimes he would have loud arguments with people outside, and sometimes he would have gunfights with people he argued with. More often when he went for his gun people left. Dan rode his bike everywhere. He had a car, and it worked. But he generally just rode his bike all over the place. Now, growing up, I just saw him as a shitty neighbor. To be fair, Dan avoided. The thing was, Tweaker Dan was actually a pretty friendly guy. He would wave to everyone. Neighbors, anyone who lived in the neighborhood, anyone he recognized. Really, it wasn't until I was older that I learned a little more about Dan and his operation. Because of some mutual friends I ended up knowing. Dan didn't just supply meth to the neighborhood users and sellers. Dan controlled a large amount of the local supply chain. There were 2 major gangs in the area, but our neighborhood fell directly in a kind of neutral area between their territories. One gang probably could have taken our neighborhood if they had wanted to. They were big enough and powerful enough. But for Dan was their supplier. They knew him as the white guy, and part of their arrangement with him is that he sold to them. But they stayed the duck out of the neighborhood. This was his arrangement with anyone affiliated that he sold to. He would sell to pretty much anyone. But if he dealt with you, you kept your shit out of his neighborhood. Don't shit where you live sort of thing. Turns out, this is also why he rode his bike everywhere and waved to everyone. Dan was keeping an eye on who came and went. He waved because he wanted you to know he was watching. It wasn't so much that he was being friendly, though he was, but that he was communicating something very important. He was watching. To those of us that weren't involved with him, we didn't know. We didn't know about his rules. Who he said was allowed to come and go. The arrangements he'd made that basically kept our neighborhood from getting worse as the city around us turned to shit. We only knew about his erratic and peculiar behavior. That he never slept. That he dealt drugs. That he did them. A lot of the clean houses in the neighborhood vilified him. But it was always peculiar to see which houses were friendly with him. Because it was not always who you'd expect. For a guy who had so much interaction with the meth heads. He was also friends with the prison guard. The family who lived a few doors down. My godfather. People you'd have thought would have avoided him. But they knew. Fuck knows how. But they did. I asked my godfather about it after I found out, and he said yeah, he knew. He just didn't see it as something that should be talked about. So that's Tweaker Dan. One of the best and worst neighbors I've ever had. Please subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.